I never imagined my name would end up on a wedding certificate beside a woman old enough to be my grandmother. 7 days ago, I stood in a white marble hall surrounded by strangers in expensive clothes, repeating vows that didn't feel like mine. Her hand was soft and trembling as she slid the ring on my finger. Mine was shaking for a different reason. Not fear, but disbelief. My name is Evan Brooks. I'm 24. Until that day, I was just a broke architecture student working nights at a grocery store, counting coins to pay rent. Now I was Mr. Evan Sinclair, husband to Margaret Sinclair, a 71-year-old woman whose face had graced business magazines and charity billboards for decades. Before we go further, tell me something. Have you ever made a choice that shocked everyone around you, but somehow felt right in your gut? If you have, tell me in the comments. I want to know how it changed you. Margaret's mansion stood at the edge of Charleston's waterfront. It looked like something out of a movie. Ivy climbing its white pillars, a garden so perfect it looked unreal, and silence so thick it swallowed your thoughts. That was where I was supposed to start my new life. But even as I carried her bouquet up the stairs, I couldn't stop asking myself one question. Why me? We'd met just a month before. I was sketching old buildings for my final project when her car broke down near the university. I helped her fix it, or at least tried to. When the tow truck came, she laughed and said, "You're the first young man who's looked me in the eye in years." That laugh stayed in my head. A week later, she offered me a job, part-time, helping her sort old architectural plans from her late husband's estate. I didn't know then that saying yes would change everything. Her house was a museum of time, black and white photos, oil paintings, antique clocks. But something about her felt alive, sharp, curious. She asked questions about my parents, my dreams, my life. When I told her my parents had died when I was 16, she looked away for a long time and said quietly, "Sometimes life takes more from us than it gives, but if we keep our hearts open, it might surprise us one day." I thought she meant kindness. I didn't realize she meant revenge. The night she proposed still feels unreal. She said she needed companionship, not romance. She promised to pay my tuition, help me finish school, and secure my future. In exchange, she wanted someone honest to share her last years with, someone untainted by greed. It sounded strange, but her sincerity disarmed me. And honestly, after years of scraping through life, a part of me was tired of struggling. I told myself it was a partnership, a favor. I didn't know that I was walking into her unfinished war. When I said, "I do," she smiled in a way I couldn't read. It wasn't joy. It was satisfaction, quiet, heavy, and cold. That night, I moved into the guest wing of her house. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I hadn't just made the biggest mistake of my life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't her husband, I was her pawn. The next morning, Margaret sat at the breakfast table in a silk robe, sipping tea like nothing unusual had happened. She greeted me with a calm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Sinclair." Hearing her call me that made my stomach twist. I tried to laugh it off, but she noticed. "You'll get used to it," she said. "Names have power. That's why people change them, to feel like they belong somewhere new." I didn't know what she meant, but something in her voice carried weight, like she wasn't just talking about me. Her lawyer, Tom, showed up that afternoon. He had the kind of face that smiled without warmth. When he looked at me, I could almost hear the question in his head. What is she thinking? He pulled her aside, and their conversation lasted nearly an hour. When they came back, her expression was lighter. His was not. Later that evening, I found a framed photograph on the piano, Margaret in her 30s, standing beside a man with kind eyes. Her late husband, Richard Sinclair. But there was another person in the photo, a woman in the background smiling just faintly. Something about her face froze me. I'd seen it before. It was my mother. I stood there for a long time, unable to breathe. What were the chances? How did my mother know Margaret's husband? When I asked about the picture, Margaret's eyes softened. "You look like her," she said quietly. "You have her calmness, her voice." Then she turned and walked out of the room. That night I couldn't sleep. Pieces of my past started falling in strange patterns. My mother's sudden move to another city years ago, her silence about certain things, her fear of men with money. I realized Margaret knew far more about my family than she let on. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This marriage wasn't about love. It wasn't even about companionship. It was about connection. But to what? On the 7th day after our wedding, I found something that confirmed my fear. A letter in Margaret's study, written by her late husband. The letter mentioned my mother's name and something about betrayal that destroyed their marriage. I didn't know it yet, but the truth inside that letter would tear open every illusion I had left and reveal the real reason Margaret Sinclair had chosen me. I wasn't supposed to find that letter. It was hidden inside a book. The Art of Building Dreams, the same architectural classic Margaret had once complimented on my shelf. When I opened it, a folded paper slid out, yellowed by time and fragile at the edges. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. It began with 3 words that hit me like a blow. To my betrayer. At first, I thought it was a business note, maybe something bitter from a rival. But as I kept reading, the letter turned personal, painfully personal. "You took everything I built, my trust, my peace, and the woman I loved. But I forgive you because love blinds us all. Margaret will never forgive herself, though. Not after what she's done." My hands trembled. The last sentence, "not after what she's done," felt like a lock clicking open in my chest. Margaret's late husband had written this before he died. But who was the betrayer? And why did my mother's name appear at the end? Tell Laura Brooks she was right. I stared at it for minutes that felt like hours. The name was clear. My mother's handwriting used to look just like that. Elegant, slightly tilted. Was she involved in Richard Sinclair's downfall? Had Margaret married me to get back at her? I needed answers. That night, I walked to the garden, where Margaret often sat reading by the fountain. The air smelled of rain and lilacs. The moonlight made her silver hair almost glow. "Margaret," I said softly, holding the letter. "Why does this have my mother's name on it?" Her eyes lifted from the pages of her book, calm but guarded. "Where did you find that?" "In one of Richard's books. The one you gave me." Her lips pressed together, and for the first time since I met her, she looked old. Not physically, but like someone carrying too many ghosts. "Sit down, Evan," she whispered. "You deserve to know the truth." I sat, but every part of me wanted to stand and walk away. "Your mother and my husband knew each other," she began slowly. "They met long before you were born. She worked for him, an assistant in his company. Brilliant, kind, loyal." She paused, looking out toward the fountain. "I trusted her," she said. "I thought she was my friend, until I found out she wasn't just helping him with business. She was helping him hide something else. Something that cost us everything." I felt my throat tighten. "Are you saying she had an affair with your husband?" Margaret's eyes flashed with something sharp, hurt, maybe even shame. "Not exactly," she said. "It was worse." Before I could ask what that meant, she stood and walked away, leaving me in the garden with the letter. That night, as thunder rolled over the house, I realized something. She hadn't denied it. She just couldn't bring herself to say it aloud. Whatever happened between my mother and her husband had ruined more than a marriage. It had created the woman now sleeping in the next room, the woman who'd made me her husband to finish a story that began long before I was born. The next morning, Margaret didn't speak to me, not a word. She sat in her study all day, surrounded by old photo albums, letters, and faded newspaper clippings. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "Margaret, please," I said, stepping inside. "You wanted me to know the truth. Then tell me." She looked up slowly, eyes rimmed red. "Do you really want to know what kind of man your mother fell for?" Her tone cut through me. She reached for a small wooden box on her desk and opened it. Inside were several photographs: her husband, my mother, and a few others taken decades ago. In one photo, they were standing together at a construction site. In another, my mother held a baby, not me. "That was their son," Margaret said quietly. "He died at 6 years old. A car accident." I frowned. "Their son?" She nodded. "Your mother wasn't the other woman. She was the only one who stayed when everyone else left. I was the one who walked away." I sat there, stunned. She continued, her voice breaking for the first time. "When Richard's company collapsed, people blamed him for everything: fraud, corruption, even theft. He was innocent. He just trusted the wrong partners. Your mother tried to help him clear his name, but I thought she was helping him escape me. So I destroyed both of them. Filed charges, leaked stories, froze accounts." She covered her face. "He died 6 months later, and your mother disappeared." The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. "You think she was innocent?" I asked. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I know I wasn't." For the first time, I saw the cracks behind her confidence, the loneliness, the regret. This wasn't just revenge, it was guilt in disguise. She looked at me then, really looked. "I didn't marry you to punish you, Evan. I married you because when I saw your face, I saw the son I never had, the one I destroyed without meaning to." Her words hit like glass, breaking inside my chest. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, suddenly changed shape. But as I left the study, something else caught my eye. A folder on the floor, half open. Inside was a set of recent photographs. Me, walking across campus, working my night shift, visiting my mother's grave. I froze. She hadn't just found me by chance. She'd been watching me for months. And suddenly, I didn't know whether her tears were real or just another part of her plan. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photographs. Me walking down the street, me at my mother's grave, me unaware that Margaret was somewhere behind those lenses. It wasn't love. It wasn't fate. It was surveillance. The next morning, I went straight to her late husband's old office in the city. The place had been abandoned for years, but the building still bore his name: R. Sinclair and Associates. Dust layered every desk, and the air carried that faint metallic scent of forgotten rooms. I found a metal filing cabinet in the corner, half rusted shut. Inside were documents: legal, financial, personal, invoices, bank statements, and one folder that stopped me cold. It was labeled Laura Brooks, Confidential. My mother's name. I opened it expecting old employment records or signed letters, but what I found were printed emails, exchanges between Richard Sinclair and someone under an alias. The emails were dated just months before his death. "You're right," one read. "Margaret can never know. The money's safe. The truth will die with me." Another one said, "Laura deserves protection. Promise me she'll never be dragged into this." The final message was timestamped the day before the car crash that killed him. If something happens to me, go to the cabin. She'll know what to do. The cabin. My mother had owned a small cabin by the lake, a quiet retreat she'd sold before her death. I'd only been there once as a child. She'd said it was where the world stopped hurting. Now I knew why. I folded the documents carefully and slipped them into my coat. As I turned to leave, I noticed something else pinned to the wall, a photograph of Margaret and Richard on their wedding day. But behind the photo, tucked into the frame, was another piece of paper. It was a police report, accident investigation, case 7214. The report stated the crash had been ruled mechanical failure, but the technician's notes at the bottom told a different story. Brake line appears intentionally severed, not consistent with typical wear or aging. My stomach dropped. It wasn't an accident. Someone had killed him. I stood there in silence, the city noise faint through the cracked windows. If the brakes were tampered with, it meant one of two things. Either Richard had enemies he couldn't escape, or someone close to him had made sure he never did. And if Margaret knew she wasn't just a grieving widow, she was keeping a crime buried. The lake hadn't changed. Same calm ripples. Same gray water stretching toward the trees. It was strange how peace could feel so heavy when your heart wasn't ready for it. I unlocked the cabin door, the key still on the old keychain my mother had left me. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cedar and dust. A single photograph sat on the mantel. Me as a boy, holding a toy airplane, my mother smiling behind me. I searched every drawer, every box, until I found a small safe beneath the floorboards. The code was easy, my birthday. Inside were letters, cash, and a tiny flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop. A folder opened, labeled simply, Truth. There were recordings, conversations between Richard and Margaret. In one, their voices were calm at first, then sharp. Richard. You're crossing a line, Margaret. Margaret. You crossed it first when you lied to me about Laura. Richard. She didn't betray you. She saved you. You just don't know it yet. Margaret. You think I'll ever forgive you? Richard. You won't have to. I won't be around long enough. The audio cut abruptly, followed by a car door slamming, then the sound of screeching tires. I froze. That was the moment, the night he died. My hands shook as I scrolled through more files, receipts for large wire transfers, offshore accounts, photos of Richard with government officials. He hadn't been corrupt. He'd been a scapegoat. Someone had framed him. And Margaret had unknowingly helped them do it. As I sat there, the door creaked open behind me. I turned. Margaret stood in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, part sorrow, part fury. I see you found it, she said softly. I swallowed hard. You knew? I knew enough, she whispered. Enough to bury what couldn't be fixed. I rose to my feet. You buried the truth. You let everyone believe he was guilty. You ruined my mother's life. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. And what would you have done, Evan? Tell the world your mother helped cover up money laundering and falsified evidence to save him? The same evidence that could have destroyed a dozen families? She didn't do it for greed, I said. She did it for him. I did it for survival, she replied. There's a difference. The air between us tightened, the kind that makes silence heavier than words. Richard didn't die in an accident, I said finally. She looked at me for a long time. No surprise, no denial, just resignation. I know, she said, and you're standing in front of the person who made sure of it. The world stopped, the clock on the wall, the waves outside. Everything froze in that single breath. I stepped back. You killed him? Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steel. I did what had to be done. He was going to destroy everything we built. I warned him, Evan. He didn't listen. I couldn't breathe. The woman I'd married, the one who'd said she wanted peace, had confessed to murder as if it were mercy. But the way she said we built stayed in my head long after she left. It wasn't just about her and Richard, it was about us. Me, her, and the legacy of what both our families had done. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove until the roads turned from asphalt to gravel, until I could hear nothing but my own breathing and the crunch of tires under the moonlight. My mind was a storm. Margaret's voice replayed over and over. You're standing in front of the person who made sure of it. She had killed him. Not in rage, but in calculation. And somehow I wasn't sure if I hated her for it or pitied her. When I finally stopped at a gas station miles away, I pulled out the flash drive again. There was one file I hadn't opened, a folder marked personal. Inside was a single letter, unsent, titled For Evan. I opened it. If you're reading this, then Margaret knows everything. I never wanted you to find out this way, but I knew you would someday. Your mother and I made mistakes, but they weren't born of greed. They were born of loyalty, to protect people you'll never meet. Margaret was part of it too, whether she admits it or not. If she killed me, it's because I let her. I read that line 5 times. I let her. Richard wasn't a victim of betrayal. He was a participant in his own death. I kept reading. There's one more truth you need to know. Laura didn't die the way you think. Her heart gave out because of something Margaret did, something she'll never forgive herself for. Don't hate her. She's already living with a punishment worse than prison. The screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. My mother, my anchor, was gone because of Margaret. And yet, Richard's words, they sounded like forgiveness. Why would he forgive the person who took everything from him? I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, shaking. For the first time since this began, revenge didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt hollow. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant Margaret had already begun to win. Not through love, but through understanding. I went back the next day. Margaret was in the dining room, setting the table as if nothing had happened. The same house where secrets bloomed like weeds now smelled of rosemary and lemon. When she looked up and saw me, her expression didn't change. You're early, she said. Hey, you confessed to murder, I replied. I thought we should talk about it before dessert. She smiled faintly. You think you know everything now, don't you? I know enough to ruin you. Then why haven't you? She asked softly. You could have gone to the police last night. I sat down, my voice low, because I wanted to hear the rest. I wanted you to tell me why. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hands steady. I killed Richard because he was about to expose everything. Not just his crimes, mine, your mother's, even yours by association. My mother wasn't part of this, I said sharply. She was, Evan. She took the fall for something Richard did. He loved her for it, but love doesn't erase guilt. She helped move money that didn't belong to him. And when he wanted to come clean, I knew it would destroy both families. I gritted my teeth. So you killed him? I gave him an out, she said. He took it. What does that even mean? She set the glass down gently like she was placing a tombstone. He wanted to die his own way. I didn't cut the brakes, Evan. He did. I just made sure the world believed it was an accident. The room spun. You're lying. Her gaze softened. I wish I were. Silence filled the room. thick, suffocating. Then she said something that tore through every wall I'd built since childhood. Your mother was there that night. I froze. She was in the car with him before it crashed, Margaret continued. She got out just before he drove off. She begged him not to do it. When the car exploded, she collapsed. Her heart gave out minutes later. The guilt, the shock, it killed her. I couldn't speak. You've spent your life trying to avenge her, Margaret said quietly. But the truth is, she died trying to save him. The room blurred. My hands trembled. You let me marry you knowing all this, I said finally. I married you, she whispered, because I thought I could make peace with the past through you. You were everything Richard loved and everything I destroyed. Loving you was the closest I'd ever come to forgiveness. I stood up. You don't get to use love as redemption. She didn't flinch. And you don't get to use hate as purpose. The candles flickered between us, one flame leaning toward the other, as if trying to bridge the distance we'd both created. That night, I realized something cruelly beautiful. Revenge was never about punishment. It was about understanding why someone deserved it. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if Margaret did. I didn't sleep that night. Margaret's confession echoed in my head, not as words, but as a weight. By morning, I decided I couldn't keep living in that house of ghosts without knowing everything. So I went into her office. Margaret never locked her drawers. She didn't need to. Her confidence was its own security system. But that morning I found a sealed envelope marked "For my attorney." I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Inside was a copy of her last will and testament. At first it looked ordinary, pages of legal jargon and property lists. Then I saw my name, and under it a clause. In the event of my passing, Evan Miles will inherit the estate of Richard Warren, as per the confidential addendum attached. The reason? Restitution for the sins of the past. Restitution. The word stung like a slap. I wasn't a husband in her eyes. I was a symbol, a way to balance the scales of her guilt. Suddenly, I heard her voice behind me. You shouldn't be reading that. I turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, calm as ever. So it's true, I said. You married me as some kind of moral settlement. She walked closer. You make it sound cruel. It is cruel. You used me to erase your own conscience. Her tone softened. Evan, you think I did this to hurt you. But you were the only person who didn't see me as a monster. That's what terrified me most. I clenched my fists. So what was I supposed to be? A chapter you could end with a signature? Her eyes glistened, the first time I'd ever seen her look human instead of untouchable. I was supposed to die with peace, she said. But loving you ruined that plan. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I didn't know if I hated her for lying or for meaning it. That afternoon, I called the lawyer listed on the will, a man named Martin Halley. When I asked him about the addendum, he hesitated before saying, "You'd better come to my office." The next morning, I drove to the city. Martin handed me a thin folder. She told me to give this to you if you ever found the will yourself. Inside were old newspaper clippings, court transcripts, and photos of two families, the Warrens and the Mileses. My family and hers. They weren't enemies. They were business partners. Until a scandal, one that destroyed everything. Margaret's late husband had stolen millions from my grandfather's firm. My mother had helped cover it up to protect my father's reputation. That's how the two families became trapped in a secret that lasted generations. Margaret didn't marry me to destroy me. She married me to give the past a proper burial. When I got home, Margaret was sitting by the fireplace, a small silver laptop open in front of her. I see you met Martin, she said without looking up. You planned this whole thing. No, Evan, I prepared for it. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a video file labeled Richard's Truth. I hit play. Richard appeared, older, weaker, his voice shaking but deliberate. If you're watching this, Margaret, it means you finally did what I asked. Faced him. I froze. He continued, Evan, I'm sorry you had to learn this way. I wronged your family. I dragged your mother into something she didn't deserve, and Margaret, she paid the price for loving a man who couldn't stop lying. Margaret looked away. You were both victims of my arrogance, Richard said. So I leave my estate to you, Evan, not as inheritance, but as proof that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Take care of her. She'll never ask for it, but she'll need it more than anyone. The screen went black. I sat there, silent. Margaret whispered, He wanted you to save me. I stared at her. Save you from what? From myself, she said. There was something in her eyes, a fragility I'd never noticed before. That night, as I lay in the guest room, I couldn't escape the question burning inside me. Had I been the weapon of her revenge? Or the answer to her confession? 3 days passed after the video. The air in the mansion felt heavier, as if the walls themselves carried secrets that were tired of being silent. Margaret stopped going out. She stayed by the window most days, watching the gardens she used to walk through alone. Sometimes she'd whisper names I didn't recognize. Ghosts from her past, I guessed. I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not because I wanted to stay, but because walking away felt like running from unfinished truth. Late one evening, I found her sitting in Richard's old study. The firelight flickered across her face, and for a moment, she didn't look 71. She looked empty. You should go, Evan, she said quietly. You've done enough. Enough? I asked. You think walking away now makes sense after everything I've learned? She smiled faintly. I thought revenge would make me feel alive again. But it only reminded me that I've been dead inside for years. I moved closer. You can still fix this, Margaret. Tell the truth. To the world, to Richard's family, to mine. She shook her head. The truth doesn't fix people. It only exposes what they refuse to see. I didn't argue, because deep down I knew she was right. When you spend your whole life building walls of deception, tearing them down doesn't free you. It just leaves you standing in ruins. That night, I heard her coughing through the walls. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore. Her strength was fading. And for the first time, I realized she didn't have much time left. The next morning, I made coffee and found a note on the counter. Evan, if I'm gone before you wake, don't blame yourself. I've left something for you in the greenhouse, the only place where life still grows in this house. M. I ran to the greenhouse. There, under the table where she kept her roses, was a locked box. I pried it open and found an envelope inside. Sealed with her initials, it was addressed to me. When you came into my life, I thought I could rewrite history, but history isn't meant to be rewritten. It's meant to be understood. I married you to make peace with a wound your mother left in me. Instead, I found a reason to forgive her. You were never my revenge, Evan. You were my reminder that love can still come from the place it once destroyed. I stood there holding the letter, the words blurring through my tears. I didn't know what to feel anymore, anger, grief, or mercy. But I knew one thing for sure. Margaret's revenge had ended long before I arrived. She had just been waiting for someone to help her see it. 2 weeks later, the storm came. Not from the sky, but from her bloodline. Her son, Alan Warren, arrived at the mansion with lawyers, reporters, and a look that could slice through glass. So this is the kid who married my mother, he said, eyeing me with disgust. Nice setup you've got here. I didn't respond. He didn't deserve one. When Margaret entered the room, frail but defiant, the tension thickened. Alan, she said softly, you don't need to do this. Oh, I do, he snapped. You've lost your mind, Mother. You married a stranger and gave him everything Dad built. You think we're going to let that happen? Margaret looked at him the way only a mother could, with disappointment and pity wrapped together. Your father built nothing, she said. He stole. You just inherited his greed. Alan turned red. You think anyone will believe you over me? You're sick. You're senile. Yestiu, he waved the documents in her face. I already filed for control of the state. The court will freeze your assets until you're declared unfit. I stepped forward. You can't do that. The will... He cut me off. You mean the forged one? My blood ran cold. What did you say? He smirked. That's right. I found the original. The real one. It names me as the only heir. Margaret didn't flinch. Then you've learned nothing from your father. Alan leaned closer to her. You ruined this family chasing ghosts. I'm just cleaning up your mess. I could feel the anger burning in my chest. You're not here for justice. You're here for money. Alan sneered. Says the broke college boy who married a dying woman for a bank account. I almost hit him, but Margaret's voice stopped me. Let him go, Evan. When Alan finally left, she turned to me with a calm I couldn't understand. He'll expose everything, I said. He's going to destroy you. She smiled faintly. No, Evan. He'll destroy himself. Her words confused me until later that night when her attorney called. Margaret had already filed a new video statement weeks earlier, one that named Alan as an accomplice in his father's fraud. Her son had come to claim her fortune, but instead he walked into his own scandal. Margaret didn't just fight back. She ended the cycle she started with poetic justice. The courthouse smelled like rain and fear. Reporters lined the steps outside, holding microphones like weapons. Every headline called me something different. The gold-digging husband, the con artist, the boy who broke a dynasty. I kept my head down as we walked in. Margaret, frail and pale, leaned on my arm. Every step looked like it cost her something she didn't have left to give. Inside, Alan sat beside his lawyers, all sharp suits and sharper smiles. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. His silence was its own kind of violence. When the judge entered, the room fell quiet. My chest tightened as the charges were read. Forgery, financial manipulation, emotional coercion, all against Margaret. It didn't matter that Alan's father had stolen fortunes. It didn't matter that Margaret had spent decades cleaning up his mess. All they saw was an aging woman who married a man half her age. When Margaret took the stand, her voice barely carried across the courtroom. I didn't marry him for love, she said. I married him for peace. For once, I wanted to feel something that wasn't fear or hate. Alan's lawyer stood. You expect the court to believe that? She nodded weakly. You can believe whatever helps you sleep, but I know the truth, and so does he. She turned to me, her eyes tired, gentle, unflinching. I wronged his family. I stole years that weren't mine to take. But Evan, he gave me something I thought I'd buried forever. What's that? The lawyer mocked. She smiled faintly. The courage to forgive myself. The room went silent. For a moment, even Alan looked unsure of what he was fighting for. Then, the judge spoke again, calm, deliberate. The video statement that Mrs. Warren recorded will be entered as evidence. Alan's face drained of color. He knew what was coming. The clip played on the big screen, Margaret's confession, her voice trembling but resolute. She admitted everything: the revenge, the lies, the marriage meant to balance the past. But then came the twist, the part that made the courtroom gasp. My husband's wealth was built on deceit. Alan helped him hide it. I have documents that prove both of them laundered money through our company for years. The room exploded. Cameras flashed. Lawyers whispered. Alan's composure cracked. And for the first time, he looked afraid. The judge called for order, but the chaos was already out. Margaret had played her final card, not to save herself, but to save me. When court adjourned, she collapsed in my arms, her breathing shallow, her body trembling. "Evan," she whispered, "it's almost over." I shook my head. "Don't say that." Her hand brushed my cheek. "I'm tired of fighting ghosts." She smiled, soft, almost peaceful. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't live your life looking backward." That's how I lost mine. Her eyes lingered on mine, full of something that felt like love, and then closed. Right there in my arms, in the middle of the courthouse hallway, the woman who built an empire of secrets took her last breath, and I couldn't stop it. The mansion felt like a museum when I returned. Every photo, every mirror, every locked door. It all looked different now. Quieter. Heavier. The housekeeper handed me an envelope. "Mrs. Warren told me to give you this if she didn't come back." I sat by the fireplace, the same spot where she used to sit, and opened it. "Evan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I once believed revenge was power. That pain could be erased by giving it back. But then I met you, and I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It transforms it. You came into my life as a consequence and left as my only redemption. Everything in this house now belongs to you. Use it wisely. Not to build walls, but bridges." I stared at her handwriting for a long time. The words didn't feel like goodbye. They felt like release. Outside, the rain had stopped. The lake shimmered in the fading sun, still, endless, calm. I thought of everything she'd done, everything we'd lost, everything she'd tried to make right before her time ran out. And for the first time since meeting her, I didn't feel like her victim. I felt like her witness. 3 months later, Alan was indicted. The evidence Margaret left behind was enough to bring down every company tied to his father's fraud. The Warrens' empire crumbled. And yet somehow the only thing that survived was the house and the story inside it. I still live there, not as a rich man, not as a widower, but as someone who finally understands the difference between vengeance and closure. Because love, even when born from revenge, can still find a way to make peace with the past. A month after the trial ended, I finally went back into Margaret's study. It had been locked since the day she died. I'd avoided it, maybe because I knew she wasn't done talking to me yet. The air smelled like cedar and old perfume. Her desk sat exactly the way she'd left it. Papers neatly stacked, pen still resting beside an unfinished note. But something felt wrong. The bookshelf on the far wall didn't align evenly. When I touched the edge, a hollow sound echoed back. A hidden door. I pressed my hand against it until the latch clicked open. Behind it, a narrow stairway leading down to a small room I never knew existed. The walls were lined with boxes, labeled with years and names. I opened one. Inside were photos, ledgers, handwritten letters, all connected to the Warren companies, their hidden accounts, and the families they ruined. And there, at the bottom of one box, was a photograph that froze me. My mother, younger, smiling, standing beside Richard Warren, Margaret's late husband. My stomach turned. I sat on the cold floor, staring at the picture, my mind racing. I found a folder beneath it, sealed in wax, Margaret's handwriting on the front. For Evan, when you're ready for the whole truth. I tore it open. Inside were 2 letters. The first from my mother to Margaret, dated almost 30 years ago. I'm done being part of this, and Richard thinks I'll stay quiet because he pays my bills, but I can't. I know what he's doing, and I won't be his cover anymore. You're his wife. You deserve to know. I'm sorry. Claire. The second letter, from Margaret, written years later but never sent. You were right to leave, Claire. I found your son by accident, but it didn't feel like fate. It felt like a chance to make something right. Even if the way I did it was wrong, I saw him struggle the same way you did. That's why I couldn't let him go. I didn't marry him to punish you. I married him to save him from what I became. I couldn't breathe. All this time, I thought Margaret's revenge was about Richard, but maybe it was about my mother. Maybe everything, the marriage, the lies, the empire, had been built around 2 women trying to survive the same man in different ways. And somehow, I was their unfinished story. I sat there until the light faded from the window above. The air was still, heavy with ghosts and truth. And then, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not grief, just clarity. Margaret wasn't my punishment. She was my inheritance. Not of money, but of redemption. The morning I decided to leave the mansion, the sky was clear. The first bright day in weeks. I packed nothing but the letters, the photograph, and Margaret's wedding ring. As I locked the door behind me, I didn't feel guilt anymore, just peace. Outside, the press was still camping by the gate, waiting for me to speak. I didn't. Some stories weren't meant to be told in headlines. I drove to the lake, the one Margaret loved most. The water was calm, sunlight glinting like scattered glass. I stood there holding the ring. It caught the light for a moment, then slipped from my fingers into the water below. It didn't sink immediately. It shimmered once, twice, then disappeared. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. That evening, I sat by my mother's grave, the letters beside me. I read both out loud, her words, then Margaret's, and for a while, it felt like they were both listening. I think you'd both laugh at how it turned out, I said quietly. How your mistakes became my inheritance, how your war became my lesson. The wind carried through the trees, soft, almost kind. I closed my eyes. The anger that used to fill me felt distant now, replaced by something deeper. Forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave them. It was one I gave myself. Weeks later, I sold the house, donated everything Margaret left behind to the victims fund she secretly built in her will. Her name would be remembered differently now, not as the woman who married for revenge, but as the woman who turned it into redemption. As for me, I moved to a small coastal town, took a quiet teaching job, and let the world forget my name. Every morning I watched the sunrise over the water, that same golden light she used to love, and whisper a thank you. Because in the end, the revenge marriage wasn't a curse. It was a confession. A story about 2 broken hearts finding one last way to make things right.